Hello, everybody. So this is the little previews that we do when internationals are on. So hello to everybody. If you're a patron, you're watching this live on our secret live streams on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel that's just for patrons. If you are a normal listener, non-patron, then you'll get this as an audio download as well with adverts and through normal podcast apps. We'll be doing these throughout the Six Nations as we do during any international window, normally on a Thursday or a Friday after the teams are out. A couple of us will get together and have a little kind of 20-minute, half an hour chat about what we can expect, because we record on a Wednesday, John, and as we found, what happens is we talk on a Wednesday and then everything we say within literally hours of the podcast going out is then redundant.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder, because we know that the SRU do listen to us, so I do often wonder if they wait for us to make our predictions bold and true, and then they go, Tony's sitting with his team sheet going,
yeah,
Cammy's picked him. Nope.
Well, look, it's a strange one because this is probably the least surprising. I mean, there's a couple of like slightly left field, but this is the least surprising Scotland team selection I can remember in living memory.
I think it's the least surprising, certainly in the Townsend era. This is the least. This is the most settled pick I think we've ever seen, and I think, as you say, there's a couple in there that, like, you know, maybe one or two stand out as being like, oh right, okay, wow, okay, but really, for the most part, like the key positions that we were all debating, it was a toss of a coin, really, and everyone that you expect to see is there.
Well, this is the thing, and there's a couple of interesting bits. I mean, obviously, Gregor Townsend makes the point on the SRU video, and I think he said it again in the, in the press conference, that the bulk of this team are between 26 and 30, which is peak time for a rugby player.
Yes,
they've all been in or around the squad since. I mean, let's have a look. I mean, most of the players there. I mean, you've got George Turner, Xander, Johnny Gray, Gant Gilchrist, Jamie Ritchie, Hamish Watson, Ali Price, Finn Russell, Sam Johnson, Stuart Hogg, McAnally, Nell, Bradbury, and maybe Kinghart. They've all been around since Vern Cotter.
Yeah.
And that's, how long has Townsend been in the job now? He's had one. Is it? It's not 5 years because, well, in fact, yeah, it's 5 years because he came in this summer. We started recording the podcast, so
that's right. Yeah,
it's almost 5 years he's been in. So most of the players in the Scotland that lineup have 5+ years experience now of playing for Scotland.
Yeah, and that's, when you talk about building. When you talk about building towards World Cups and building, look at the great teams that have kind of started to really shine within Six Nations. Look at teams that have done well in World Cups. You're always talking about the cap count, and you're always talking about, that kind of settled lineup. And I think, it's something I had indicated on the main pod a couple of weeks ago, that, like, thinking about players, it's great having utility players, and me and Craig had a really good debate about that, but like, you want your players to be you almost want the team to pick itself in some ways, but know that there is options pushing. So it's great that I'm really excited by this team.
Yeah, no, very excited. I mean, there's a great stat from Kevin, Top of the Moon, who's really good at these things. So 20 out of the 23 Scots playing have previous experience of lifting a Calcutta Cup. Only 11 Englishmen have done the same in the opposite lineup.
Wow.
2018, when we beat them at Murrayfield, beat them at Murrayfield, not one Scot in the 2018 lineup had ever won a Calcutta Cup, while 22 of the 23 of their opponents had. Now, that's not a great omen, to be fair, because we won 2018, but still, I think it just shows the experience the Scotland team's got.
I think it shows that it shows the change in the last few years in the mentality and the way. Again, we talked about it, that World Cup, that 2019 World Cup was a bit of a watershed. Yes, we'd kind of gave England a bloody nose in 2018, but for me, that 2019 World Cup was the change where we started to believe we can and should be competing and beating anyone. And you just maybe actually that 2018 Calcutta Cup was that was the point. Everyone realised, oh, actually, we're quite good at this rugby stuff, aren't we?
Yeah. Should we go through the team then?
Yes, let's.
So we've got we'll do the packs first. So we've got for Scotland, we've got Rory Sutherland, George Turner, Xander Ferguson, which I think is as we predicted. I think we said that Turner is the informed one. Was maybe a toss up between him and McInally, but
yeah, I think for me, like, it's so that decision wasn't as close as we thought, really, because I think Turner's far and away the form hooker in Scotland at the moment. I think probably the debate was actually McInally or maybe an Ashman for the bench, but Turner deserves the shirt on merit. He had the shirt from the Six Nations previously and deserves it.
Yeah, and then we've got Johnny Gray back in the second row, Grant Gilchrist, then back row, Jamie Ritchie, Hamish Watson, Matt Ferguson. Now, no Rory Darge, but I think you've gone for experience in this game. I think after the experiment of Cammy Redpath last time round, this is it's obvious. I think Gregor Towns is going for, let's get some guys that have experienced this before, and so Watson gets the pick.
Yeah, and let's not forget, of course, Townsend and the coaching team are seeing these guys on a daily basis. If Hamish Watson, with all his experience and everything we know he can do, wasn't tearing it up in training, he wouldn't be playing. That's it.
A bad Hamish Watson performance is still better than anybody else's best performance sometimes. So.
Exactly, yeah. So, and I think the balance, people were asking about maybe Darge for the bench. I think the balance, the way the bench is balanced out, I think obviously you've got, with that starting back row, if anyone goes down, someone can fill in. So obviously, Bradbury would come on for Ferguson. If Ritchie goes down, again, Bradbury or Ferguson could go to 6. Ferguson's playing 6 more for Glasgow now than 8, actually. And then the quandary with 7, obviously Ritchie would just shift over to 7. So it's a nicely balanced back row with lots of cover. Darge is an out and out 7. You would have to, so it would be one of those ones you would have to start Darge, for him to be an option. And he'll get a game later in the Six Nations, but I think this is the right pick for this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too much into future games, but I could see Darge getting a game against Wales or Italy, and that's that's not to be down on Wales or Italy. I think it's just more a kind of game that would be suited for him.
Can we backtrack just slightly as well, back to the second rows? Because obviously,
of course we can.
You mentioned Johnny Gray returning, which it'll be interesting to see match fitness wise where he's at and see how up to speed he is. But the interesting pick for me was Grant Gilchrist, and the Edinburgh fans are going to probably fall off their seats in shock at this one. I think that's a really, really sensible pick, given what we're expecting the conditions to be this weekend. And I think that's why he's in there. Line out is going to be potentially the line out is going to be a shambles. So you need an experienced guy in there to go, let's go to the front, boys, please.
Yes.
Every time. So
yeah, and I think he does that. What Gilchrist does well, which I think frustrates me when it's the conditions are good, is he's good. He'll truck it up for you and he'll recycle the ball very well. He doesn't make many yards, which I think in drier conditions can be a bit frustrating when other forwards can do. But that's given it's wet conditions, what you need somebody of his sort of weight and size to truck it up. Doesn't matter if it doesn't make any yards, so long as the ball's recycled and we go again, that's what it's going to be, I think.
And then with Sam Skinner obviously covering lock to come off the bench, things don't get any easier for England.
Yeah, I think that, this is the interesting thing. So the pack, we're equal, roughly, we ship 2 kilograms to England, which what's that, 2 bags of sugar? It's not much, is it?
Yeah.
2 big bags of sugar. In terms of caps, so we're much more experienced. 283 caps for Scotland versus 218 for England. Scotland with 126 Nations caps to England's 95. They've got more Lions though, 5 to our 3. And the average age of our forwards is 28 and theirs is 26.6. I think.
Does that include subs?
No, it doesn't. That's just
just the starters.
We'll come to the subs. We'll come to the subs in a minute. The interesting thing for me, I think the back row battle is going to be fascinating. And Alan McDonald makes the point on the comments there. He says the England team has the potential to be explosively brilliant or to collapse spectacularly, or both. No more so for me than in the back row, because the English back row is Lewis Ludlam, Tom Curry, and Sam Simmonds. Now, I like Lewis Ludlam a lot.
Yes.
I think he's someone that should have a lot more caps for England than he does. Tom Curry, I will still maintain with my dying breath, is overrated.
Yep.
I'm not saying he's a bad player. I just think England have never had a fetching 7 before, and so as soon as they got one, they got overexcited. But it's that back row battle will be interesting, and I don't see Scotland taking a step backwards in terms of where that back row has, how well that back row has performed for Scotland in the past. They're not ones to take a step backward. Jamie Ritchie sometimes can, let the occasion get to him maybe, but whether or not if England are going to be in the game for long periods, their back row is going to have to achieve parity without us, and I think that's the challenge for England.
Yeah, and it's a very so. For me, seeing a guy like Sam Simmonds back in there, who has found form a wee bit in the last couple of weeks, but Alex Dombrandt on the bench is by far and away the form back row for England. And again, it's that Eddie Jones thing, isn't it? I just don't know. Sam Simmonds must have done something very naughty, because there's he just doesn't seem to like him. And he's been pushed into, let's be honest, if Billy Vunipola was even 13% fit, he would have picked him.
Yeah.
That's how much he so yeah, I think we've got nothing to fear with that back row. I think it's going to be interesting. It'll be a clash of styles. I think the days of Jamie Ritchie getting overawed by the occasion, which, as you said, has happened, I don't think that happens anymore. I don't think that's going to happen. Having the Mish beside him is obviously, it's really good for just keep maintaining that bit of experience. But then look at, again, Matt Fagerson, and again, this is it's not hands in the ruck. We can't do hands in the ruck here, but Scotland fans, he's not small. He makes shots. He's a good number 8.
He's a very good number 8. I think that's there's somebody in the comments, and they haven't got I don't know who it is because they've not allowed Facebook to tell us their name, but Bradbury's in better form than Matt Fagerson. Now, I think, arguably that's true. Not to say that one, that Matt Fagerson isn't in good form, but yes, Bradbury's in better form. I think what this comes down to is experience. Now, yes, Magnus Bradbury has played. He's one of those players that's played since the Vern Cotter era, but has played much more intermittently than Matt Fagerson.
Yep.
I think that back three for Scotland is a settled back three, and I think Bradbury. I would rather have Bradbury coming on from the bench than Matt Fagerson.
Yeah, agreed. I completely agree, and I think that's swung it actually. I think Bradbury could come off that bench and be, again, it's, like we said, it doesn't get any easier when a guy like, you're bringing on Sam Skinner, you're bringing on Magnus Bradbury. That's 2 huge ball carriers coming on in tricky conditions, 60 minutes in. If you're an English tackler by that point, your shoulders are sore, you don't want to see those 2 coming on. And I completely agree with the poster. Bradbury is in better form. There's no question for me, he is in better form, but Fagerson's the incumbent, and it's up to Bradbury to wrestle that shirt off him now.
And also, we've talked about this on the podcast before. We have to kind of move away, I think, from this idea that your starting 15 is your best players. That coaches these days pick a squad, a match day squad, to go out and win a match, and that will involve sometimes putting your better player or your informed player on the bench because of the impact that they can bring on. And I think Townsend knew what was coming with that England team. And if you look, actually, what's interesting when you were talking about the bench, John, like in terms of total caps, Scotland have 148. The English bench has 293 caps.
Yeah,
right. So that's a lot of experience coming off the bench for England, and so you need to throw everything at them in the last quarter, and that's where Scotland, I think, have lost. And we're certain that's where we lost the game against South Africa in the autumn.
We've quite often found ourselves dropping off in that last 20, and I think the bench we've picked this time out, and obviously we'll cover the rest of it, but I think the guys that we've picked to bench this time out, I don't see that that's going to be an issue. I think, if anything, the level is going to go up and we're going to be able to match England for that last 20. So, I think it's a really, really good pick. And I'm being positive about Bradbury. Listen to me.
I know it's good, John. Alan McDonald does raise the worry about Xander. If he's injured in the first 5 minutes, it's 75 minutes for WP now. Don't worry about WP now.
Nah, Nell will
in those conditions.
I know exactly.
Nobody's running hard yards in those conditions, are they?
Nell reminds me of, so like when you think about the way that certain animals move. And it's done to just preserve all energy, like a penguin, for example, right? It just moves in a certain way just to preserve its minimal movements to preserve all energy for when it has to run away from a tiger.
Yeah.
Not that a penguin would run away from a tiger, but you get the idea. In my head, this is working, right? Nell is that person. Nell has mastered the art of just such small movements, saving himself to moor someone in the scrum.
Yeah, I think he'll be fine. They'll protect him. They'll stick him on the wing just to kind of in defence.
Back to the point about Xander, before we go to the backs, can every Scotland fan who has now dubbed Xander the penalty machine please look at other tight head props? Guess what? Props concede penalties. There you go. There's a tagline for you. Props means penalties. Xander concedes penalties. He does, yes.
Yeah.
His work rate around the... Who else could you pick? If MD says, let's start Nell and bring in Sebastian and drop Xander Fagerson, they are high. Go away, please.
Alan said I would have started him and let him empty the tank, then Xander's there. I mean, I can see it both ways, but I think we have to...
That I can work with, but Xander has to be there. Let's be very clear.
The backs then. I mean, it's... The only thing looking at that backs is that it was 12 when you look at it. 12, I mean, maybe 14 if we're being, Darcy Graham's there, but this is the kind of game that Darcy Graham relishes. We know that. He's absolutely tearing it up for Edinburgh at the minute. I get that people want Calstain to come in, but it's about playing the most experienced team, and Darcy Graham has experience.
I think it's a no-brainer. I think Kyle Steyn is an option, and I think he is, if anything was to happen to either winger and Kyle Steyn was to come in to start against another team, you would have no issue whatsoever, and he would do your job. I think Kyle Steyn offers very different skill sets, all of which are good, but I think Darcy Graham, just for that pure X factor, experience, and the ability to... There's maybe an argument regarding Kyle Steyn's kickoff chase that it could have been really useful this weekend, but then who knows what direction the wind's going to blow? Are we even going to get kickoffs?
And we've seen we've talked again. People will talk about Darcy Graham under high ball, but that's not where Scotland put him in defence. I don't think it's where Edinburgh put him in defence. They drop back. It's Finn, Hoggy, and Doohan will be in the back of the field, fetch and returning kicks all day, and Darcy will be up in defence, smashing back guys 5 times the size of him, as he always does.
And I think to counteract a wee bit of that English, like the way England are set up to play, they've obviously picked some pretty, for some reason, they've saw fit to pick Marchant on the wing, which seems a bit crazy. But anyway, there was a few speedsters they could have went for. But I think Darcy is there to kind of offer that security and defence whilst still being able to absolutely toast people. I'm comfortable with that. 12 for me. Again, I don't know, we've all had our debates about 12 and the will he won't he Redpath. It was never a question for me.
Yeah.
Sam Johnson has been in great form for Glasgow this year. Redpath has obviously only just come back, and I think he is the future of the 12 shirt. There's no doubt, and I love him as a player. But Johnson has done it's like Johnson's done nothing to deserve not having the shirt, and Redpath's not had time to do anything to deserve the shirt yet. So it was a no-brainer. Sam Johnson won't let you down. It's a tale of the team again, isn't it? That Sam Johnson's the most experienced. This game and the conditions that we're expecting absolutely 100% fit into what Sam Johnson will do for you against England in these conditions. Yeah, if you need your 12 to be trucking it up and just doing the basics well, you pick Sam Johnson because he does that all day and twice on a Sunday. So he's a very good pick. The rest of the backs, like, they pick themselves.
Yeah,
actually
absolutely.
pick themselves.
I think the only two surprises then on the bench were, I mean, I think Kinghorn was always going to be on the bench because of the cover he now gives at 10 and 15, and I'll come on to that in a minute, my mad theory about what might happen. But White and Tuipulotu for me are interesting choices. I think the White over Velicott, I think Townsend's justified as saying he's come off the bench a lot for London Irish. Maybe he's more familiar with the English players as well, so they're not as, although Velicott has got experience of playing in the Premiership as well, but he's used to coming off the bench. And also, Ali Price is an 80-minute scrum half.
Aye.
How many Scotland games have we had with George Horn, where George Horn sat on a bench for
79 minutes,
79 minutes and never even seen the field?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
There's a chance Ben White isn't getting his first cap on Saturday. That's all I'm saying, and that's not down to anything Ben White done. It's just Ali. That would suggest to me they're planning 80 minutes of Ali Price.
Yeah, and I think that would be fair. The counter argument is, again, Ben White has been in camp now. Townsend must be liking what he's seeing. Velicott, it'll have been a close run thing between the two of them. I think there's an element of the unknown about Ben White as well, certainly at international level. But as long as he doesn't end up at flanker, we're fine.
Yeah, that's true.
As long as he doesn't end up in a scrum at flanker, we're okay.
Yeah. And Tuipulotu is another one that's interesting. And an interesting choice on the bench. He's got international experience now. I think it's just it's the X factor, I'm guessing, that he's there for.
Yeah, I think X factor and coverage, because, again, thinking about the way that we could shift things with your mad theory about Kinghorn to come, I think Tuipulotu really gives you. So he obviously 12-13 coverage. He's been playing it a bit at 12 recently, and actually has looked really good. He started at Glasgow at 13, looked had that kind of dynamism about him at that position. He's quick enough to cover wing as well. So if worst case scenario, we had to shift things about, I think he's just been rewarded for some really good form.
Yeah, and I think he's he's not shy in defence either.
No, exactly. And if you were thinking, like, what were the other options, I suppose, for that 23 shirt? I think he's there on merit. I think he's a very, very talented rugby player and has shown form. So throw him in.
This is my mad theory now for people that I think we've only talked about this in the group chat, but I can see with that team, barring injury, I think the plan will be in the last 15-10 minutes, if we're chasing the game, that you put Kinghorn at 10, shift Finn to 12, Tuipulotu 13, and Chris Harris on the wing. Yeah. And that's not necessarily, you can then interchange those, Tuipulotu and Harris can switch positions, Kinghorn and Russell can change who comes in at first receiver. I can see some sort of mad combination. Cats at a rave 2.0.
If we are chasing the game, I think you're absolutely right. I think we would be looking at you would be looking at Kinghorn to bring some of that direct running at 10 that we've come to enjoy, and then looking for Russell to kind of almost shifting the first receiver out one and try to just play a wee bit wider, move the English defence just one out, but have Kinghorn essentially as almost an auxiliary back row, running hard at 9-10, and then just we'll play from there. So
offloads left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
The other, I suppose that's the one thing that worries me. I think the one kind of worry I have about the England bench is George Ford. I think Marcus Smith is an exceptional talent. I think he's he potentially got the potential to be as good, if not better, than Finn Russell in terms of the way he plays. But I think George Ford is underrated as a 10. I know Robbie Squidge Rugby absolutely loves him and rates him highly. Nobody rates George Ford as highly. Not even George Ford rates George Ford as highly as Squidge does. But
no,
I think I can see he's got pragmatism to him. He's got a very good kicking game. I'm not saying Mark Smith hasn't, but I think that for me, if we're chasing the game, George Ford coming on in a tight game worries me slightly because he has that ability to kick, and I think there's going to be a lot of kicking at the weekend.
See, if the hype train around Marcus Smith wasn't in like overdrive just now, really Ford should be starting the game.
Yeah.
He's the perfect player for what we're expecting to see at the weekend, because he'll have England playing in positions that Scotland. I'm happy he's on. I was actually happier when he was just not even in the squad. Like that was fine. That's no disrespect to him. That's actually the ultimate compliment, because I agree. I think he is a very underrated player, and he's the type of player that will move England into positions that Scotland won't want to be in. And particularly with the 50-22, with the wind the way it is scheduled to be, we could see some very, very strange rugby, and Ford would be the perfect 10 for them in that. I'm not saying Marcus Smith won't be able to, as you said, Smith's got it all. He's got a kicking game as well, but it's not as developed as Ford.
Forwards, yeah.
So
it's interesting. Phil Lewis, hello Phil, friend of the podcast, who's been on before. Phil's still joining us despite the slander that I threw Wales' way earlier in the week. So Tom Curry will ship penalties because that's all he's doing for sale at the minute. I think that's valid. I think about the flip side of that is, we should talk about this. Is I don't know where Scotland's penalties are coming from. Like Finn Russell in the autumn, his kicking wasn't there. Now that's not to say that it can't be, because he can. Finn Russell can be a 90% plus kicker.
Yeah.
I think he's gone through periods of being that. He kicks fairly well for Racing. I think, but the conditions are going to be challenging, and in the game like this, we need to nail every penalty.
Yes. I think it'll be interesting to see what the tactic is, because I reckon there will be a degree of pragmatism. Let's be honest. If you're sitting 38, 40 metres on the angle in a Murrayfield wind that is just going in circles, you're not going to ask your kickers to slot it through the posts. You're going to go to the corner.
Yeah.
And as long as the line out's working, you're going to do that all day. I think there's going to be some really leadership is going to be key, and decision making on that is going to be key. I agree. I think so. Russell against Australia was, he obviously kicked the winning penalty, kicked well for the Lions, but then he has days where he doesn't kick well, and it's. I guess I just don't like. I get the idea that we would need it's the sort of day that you would think, you would want your Greg Laidlaw or your Chris Patterson to just knock over penalties all day, but I don't even think the best goal kickers in the world will be able to do that in the conditions.
40-mile-an-hour winds,
yeah, as they're forecast to be.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's necessarily as big an issue. I would be expecting Stuart Hogg to be place kicking a lot to the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe again, Blair Kinghorn, if he was to come on the last 20, he's been kicking very well from hand to various corners. So that seems to be, for me, that'll be the tactic, as long as the line out's working.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a good rattle through. I mean, we briefly touch on the fact that Eddie Jones is at it again.
I mean, he's just
trying to gaslight the entire nation of Scotland. Just to, people say this about the England team. Nobody says that, Eddie.
No, Eddie. No, we don't. No. We say lots of things about you, Eddie.
Yeah.
But he's actually like, we all had a reaction to Razzie Yellow Circle, but Eddie is just as bad, if not worse. He is a disgusting. Talk about rugby values. Look at these guys setting the tone for people. It's not acceptable.
No, 100%. So that's it for our wee Calcutta Cup preview. We'll be back with the main podcast next Wednesday. We'll have then we'll then have our full podcast Wednesday. Then we'll have a preview of the Wales game.
Yes,
either Thursday, Friday.
Tis the plan.
That is the plan. So yes, so thank you very much everyone for listening. Don't forget you can sign up to the Patreon. Patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast if you want to watch these live or get the bonus content podcast we do every week on the main one. Otherwise, it is goodbye from me and goodbye from John.
Cheers, folks.